Hello, Wobbly Phil here. There were some quirky, some might prefer to say innovative, motorcycles designed and built in the 1970s. Hardly a week went past without hearing that a mad mechanic or demented manufacturer had reinvented the wheel. I suppose the equivalent of those folk nowadays would be Elon Musk. But not all of these weird ideas ended up in the trash can of history. No, some of them made it into production, and you could go to the shops and buy them. So prepare to be gobsmacked by the 10 strangest motorcycles of the 1970s that you could actually buy. This is going to be a two-part video counting down from number 10 with the first 5 balmy bikes this week and the top 5 next week. Here we go. Number 10. I'm kicking off this list with a machine that usually trumps any other in a compendium of crazy motorcycles of the 1970s, the Quasar. Launched in 1976 with a Reliant engine, only 21 were produced and only 7 of those were made by the original designers, Malcolm Newell and Ken Lehman. But what the Quasar lacked in sales, it made up for in publicity. I remember we were blown away when we first glimpsed it in the 1970s, and it still looked like the future in the 1980s, when a few more were turned out with Suzuki and Honda engines. It was still being featured on Top Gear in 1988. They were jaw-droppingly expensive, being built and assembled by hand. The sticker price, including tax, was £5,885, something like £24,500 in today's money, which would get you a brand new BMW M1000R and change. There are a couple of reasons why I've placed it last in this top 10. The first is because it was, frankly, a heroic failure. Despite many attempts to get it off the ground, it never flew and only sold in handfuls. And secondly, once we'd got over the shock of the new back then, it suddenly dawned on us that this wasn't anything terribly original. It was just a Bond bug that had been chopped in half. Number 9. The Ariel 3. And here it is, whatever it is. No, that's not me being facetious, much as I like being facetious, but the actual advertising slogan that BSA used for their, whatever it is. This truly horrendous piece of crap, stroke charming and adorable little moped, insert preference here, was a 50cc 2-stroke 3-wheeler that even your 90-year-old granny wouldn't have been seen dead on, running down to Tesco's to buy her weekly crate of Sonatogen. Or maybe she would, because it handled that badly due to its 12-inch wheels and hinged, some might say unhinged, front end, that it earned the nickname the Granny Killer. BSA owned the Ariel mark in the 1970s, and a cynical management thought they could capitalise on the proud British name with a 70-year history that had come up with the glorious Square 4. Forgetting, of course, that by the 1970s, the Ariel brand was more likely to conjure up washing powder in most Brits' minds than a motorcycle. Even scantily clad ladies couldn't sell it when it looked as if they had been struck down by a catastrophic case of thrush just by sitting on it. You can still buy them at auction for anything from a few £100s to £3,000, proving that you can indeed be paid to have rubbish taken away. Number 8. Anything Eastern European. Back in the 1970s, I lived a couple of miles from an RAF base that had previously been used by the US Air Force. I'd often be woken in the middle of the night by something fearsomely powerful being spooled up and sent off to intercept Soviet jets over the North Sea, it being the height of the Cold War. Which is why we were all scratching our heads when we saw bikes like the CZ, Jawa and Ural. These machines were manufactured in the Eastern Bloc by our sworn enemies, presumably using the same tooling they used to make the tanks that would imminently roll into West Germany. Not only that, they looked, performed and handled like the tanks that would imminently roll into West Germany. Somehow it seemed unpatriotic at the time to line the pockets of evil communist regimes, but a few folk were tempted by the bargain basement prices and definitely got what they paid for. While they'd never win any beauty competitions or hill climbs, I do recall owners saying the things just went on and on and on, even after all the paintwork and chrome had peeled off and the silencers had rusted through, about a week after they rode them out of the showroom. Number 7. The Honda CX500. The plastic maggot, to use the nickname it gained because of its plug-ugly looks and lashings of moulded parts, began life in Japan in 1977, reaching UK shores a year later. This bike really was an oddity in the 1970s when water-cooled engines were rare, shaft drives were rare, and an odd twisted V-twin configuration was off the unicorn scale. Was it a BMW Boxer twin? No. Was it a Motor Guzzi V-twin? No. The darn thing didn't even have a kickstart, and it sported Comstar wheels shod with the first ever tubeless tyres used on a production motorcycle. Even more strangely, this bike was made by Honda, the home of the dull but reliable inline 4. We didn't really know what to make of it, and we especially didn't know what to make of the Turbo Maggot, which Honda released a few years later. But it gained a place in the hearts of motorcycle couriers to the extent that you couldn't move for maggots in London in the 1980s and 1990s. Even now you can find them transformed into ludicrous hipster bikes on eBay. Number 6. The Munch Mammut. If you had a lazy $4,000 burning a hole in your pocket, you could have gone out and bought one of these behemoths in the 1970s. This was a motorcycle on steroids, mind-boggling and like nothing else we'd ever seen. We only ever caught a glimpse of it in magazines, and when we did, our eyes popped out of our heads. I've made an entire video on the Munch Mammut, so do take a look if you want to know more about this weird and wonderful machine. The link is in the description. Next week I'll be counting down the top 5 strangest motorcycles of the 1970s, so stay tuned for that. You can always hit that notification bell thingy to be sure you don't miss it. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, then please consider liking, subscribing, commenting and sharing to let YouTube know we're doing something right here at 3 Phils. Thank you.